atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where love means never having to say, I'm sorry I made that extraterrestrial parasite explode out of your chest. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radio. So good of you to join us tonight. Coming up on the Worst People in the Whole Wide World Weekly Update, the NBA outs itself as a less convincing version of pro wrestling. The Democrats and the fake news media shrug off the comical failure of their big No Kings weekend by instead moaning about dead drug smugglers and free ballrooms. Bruce Springsteen spends 20-plus years lecturing his countrymen about how they're terrible people if they don't vote the way he thinks they should vote, and then can't figure out why his big Hollywood biopic movie died an embarrassing death at the box office. But first, it is time for everybody's favorite segment of the WPWWWWU, the one you spend the whole week looking forward to, and we check in once again with our very good friends across the pond in the jolly old Islamic Republic of Britannistan, where this week, in what I guess we can describe as a refreshing change of pace, British Muslims got into the Halloween spirit by dressing up like Antifa and holding a counter-protest to a protest that wound up not even taking place because it was banned by the government. Could we ever make this stuff up if we tried? Why, no. As a matter of fact, we could not. You see, the UK Independence Party was going to march through the Tower Hamlets neighborhood of East London on Saturday, and if you don't know who the UK Independence Party is, UKIP to its friends. These guys are the super-duper big, bad, evil, racist monsters. If the Tories are just a little bit racist and Reform UK is slightly more racist, UKIP is like the swastika-shaped cherry on top of the racism cake. UKIP is so racist, it's like the Totenkopf tattoo on the chest of a Democrat Senate candidate from the state of Maine. And what is it that makes UKIP so abominably racist and so morally intolerable to the sensibilities of people with all the correct opinions? Well, not only were they strongly in favor of Brexit, but they never wanted anything to do with the European Union in the first place. Worse yet, they don't think Britain should be any sort of racial and cultural melting pot. They think British society and culture were built exclusively by white English-speaking Britons, and they are not afraid to say so. I know, it's a lot to take in, but we'll get through this together. And it gets even more horrifying still. UKIP is so racist and so xenophobic, they don't think huge numbers of Muslims should be allowed to come live in the United Kingdom who have no intention of making any effort to assimilate themselves into British culture. They think British people shouldn't automatically be ashamed of the fact that Great Britain brought modern civilization and democratic self-government to vast areas of the globe that would otherwise still be living today in a state of primitive Stone Age savagery under the thumb of some tin pot despotic autocrat. And worst of all, UKIP doesn't believe members of the LGBTQIA-EIEIO community should enjoy special rights under the law, or that British citizens who are still true believers in the British state religion should be hauled to jail for reading the Bible in public. So needless to say, these guys aren't very popular on the airwaves of the BBC or in the pages of The Guardian. You know how here in America, on your cable fake news channels, it's simply treated as a matter of fact that Donald Trump is either Hitler adjacent, just like Hitler, or worse than Hitler? That's the way the British media talk about UKIP. So UKIP was planning on having a little demonstration, a bit of a march through Tower Hamlets in East London, which is the most heavily Muslim area of the UK and also the most crime-infested area of the UK. And I'm sure those two facts are totally unrelated. But the Home Office said, nope, don't think so. You're not going to have any march because that might... say the words with me, it might inflame community tensions. And so the march didn't proceed. The counter-demonstration, on the other hand, went ahead with the full blessing of Sir Keir and the stormtroopers. Why do you need to have a counter-demonstration when the actual demonstration never happened? Unclear. And when did British Muslims start cosplaying as Portland Antifa? Also unclear. But if your correspondent was a cynical man, he might say, number one, the counter-demonstration was allowed to go ahead because the British government has a different set of rules for Muslim immigrants than they do for their own citizens. They don't call him two-tier Keir for nothing, am I right? And number two, because the radical Islamist cause and the Antifa cause are one and the same, and it's all being financed by the same people. And the aim of the financiers is to rot and destabilize Western societies in every way that they can be rotted and destabilized. If this was an organic grassroots type of thing, actual community activism, in other words, then the community organizers might have concluded, since the thing we're counter-protesting against isn't going to happen, there's probably not much point in counter-protesting it. But it's not an organic grassroots type of thing. It's not actual community activism. And so the dark money billionaire financiers of the thing said, God damn it, we paid good money for all those black trousers and black sweatshirts and black helmets and black balaclavas. And we paid good money for all those signs and banners and placards. And by God, we shall be damned if that's all going to go to waste. And speaking of protest money going to waste, it would seem safe to say at this point that the financiers of last weekend's No Kings protests in which a bunch of geriatric ex-hippies in wheelchairs and a bunch of weird sex perverts in animal costumes spent the day chanting inane slogans and trying their level best to pretend they were just delighted to be spending an afternoon in each other's company, didn't achieve the desired result they were seeking to achieve. And how do we know the desired result wasn't achieved? Because everybody had stopped talking about it by Tuesday afternoon, and they had moved on to moaning incessantly about the White House ballroom? Well, yes, evidently the East Wing of the White House was some sort of imperishable historic and architectural treasure, and President Trump has committed the dastardly, unconscionable crime of the century by pulling it down in order to build an interior space that enables the White House, for the first time ever, to accommodate a crowd in excess of 250 people. Now, if you watched Curmudgeon's Corner on Wednesday, and of course you did, you already know this is a ridiculous load of bullshit, for the historical record tells us clearly, unambiguously, that the East Wing of the White House was absolutely nothing until 1834, and then it was some faucets and some shower stalls until the 1870s. Then it was a couple of greenhouses until the first decade of the 20th century. Then it was a garage and a cloakroom until 1942, when a two-story office block was built on the site in order to disguise the presence of the presidential emergency bunker that sits beneath it. But don't try telling any of this to the denizens of the fake news performance artist community, because they want you to believe a very terrible, very awful crime has been committed against American history this week. Except that argument starts failing pretty rapidly when it runs up against the actual facts, as fake news performance art narratives often do, for it's pretty difficult to argue that some affront against the history of the nation has been perpetrated due to the fact that the First Lady and the official White House calligrapher might have to temporarily relocate their offices. But CNN and NPR, they have both got the answer for that rhetorical conundrum, for they both, hilariously, apparently with a straight face, published columns on Friday saying that, damn it, the reason the East Wing is an historic and cultural treasure is because the president's private movie theater was there, and this irreplaceable cultural artifact, it's the equivalent of the American Rosetta Stone to hear these idiots tell it, is now no more. So let's just take a moment to run through the logic here. The president loses his private movie theater, and the country gains a 900-person state ballroom for which the U.S. taxpayer will be charged $0. And that's a bad thing? Because call me an ignorant, uncultured bumpkin if you must, but it seems from where I am sitting that if you're a person who cares about democracy, this is a change you ought to be celebrating. A state ballroom with a capacity of 900 will enable far more Americans to attend events at the executive mansion than have ever been able to attend such events before. And the price we pay is that the president and 30 of his closest friends can no longer enjoy an intimate private screening of the latest Steven Spielberg picture. And that's somehow a defeat for democracy and not a victory. Oh, and also, inconvenient truth alert, 15 years ago, Barack Obama spent $376 million of taxpayer money installing a basketball court and some new water pipes, and CNN covered that story like it was the greatest thing that ever happened to the Republic. And speaking of basketball courts, if you watched Curmudgeon's Corner on Friday, and of course you did, then you know a lot of people in the NBA, which evidently doesn't stand for no betting allowed, have got a lot of splaining to do. Because every single thing that happens on the court during every single NBA game now has to be viewed with suspicion. And this is a scandal that goes far beyond some rigged poker games being run by the mafia in order to gain leverage on certain players and coaches. It's a scandal that has the potential to wreck the league entirely, because when the paying customer no longer has a reason to be convinced that the product on the court is being played on the level, he is not going to remain a paying customer for much longer. And that's the situation in which the NBA now finds itself. And it will remain so for as long as these online sports books remain legal. When players can place wagers on their own performance and make huge sums of money just by playing badly on purpose or removing themselves from games, then all bets are off now, no pun intended. We already know about the example of John Tay Porter of the Toronto Raptors, who was banned for life by the NBA last year when he made $1.2 million by intentionally failing to secure his sixth rebound and then removing himself from the game with a fictional injury, because there is an over-under line on every aspect of every player's performance in every game. And Porter placed a very large wager that he would have fewer than 5.55 rebounds in the game in question. And now we've got the additional example of Terry Rozier of the Miami Heat, who's one of the players who was just arrested in the FBI probe, who, according to the indictment, told one of his friends to place large wagers that he would underperform his usual stats in this one particular game. Then he pretends to get injured midway through the first quarter, comes out of the game, so he winds up with fewer points, fewer rebounds, fewer steals, fewer assists, fewer everything. And the friend makes $200,000 by betting the under on all of those things, and then they split the ill-gotten winnings 50-50. But a few questions are begged here, and the biggest one is, Terry Rozier, just how big an idiot are you? Because a bit of arithmetic yields the fact that your yearly salary is $26 million. That means you make $317,000 per game, and you're going to take a chance on wrecking your career, getting banned for life, so you can make an extra 100 grand? You're serious right now? If you dropped 100 grand on the sidewalk, would you even bother picking it up? That is like 1 hour's wages, you impossible fool. And speaking of impossible fools, Bruce Springsteen used to be a musical artist who made himself very famous and very wealthy by pretending to identify with the plight of the average American working man. Me, I am too young to remember when he had that sort of street cred, because my earliest memory of Springsteen is when he threatened to sue Ronald Reagan for playing Born in the USA at his campaign rallies in 1984. Apparently, Reagan's people committed the terrible faux pas of thinking that was a pro-American song. And the boss said, no, goddammit, it's a song about how much America fucking sucks. And I shall not have it played for any happy sing-song sing-alongs at any Republican rallies. So you will cease and desist these activities immediately, or my lawyers will be in touch. And that was, 41 years ago? Since then, Springsteen has campaigned for every Democrat candidate in every election, and since Donald Trump came along, he has really had no compunction about stating his belief that people who vote for Trump are pretty much the worst people in the world so far as he is concerned. But here's the thing about building your reputation on a perceived connection with the common man and then going out of your way for decades on end to slander and alienate and lecture and insult the intelligence of that very same common man. When you do that, and Hollywood makes a big, lavish biopic about the story of your life and your career, you might find that half the people in the country want no part of going to see it. Because who wants to go see a movie about a guy who hates your guts and doesn't hesitate to say so? The box office projections said the Springsteen biopic was on track to make somewhere between 12 and 15 million on opening weekend. What did it wind up making? 8. So if you went to see this thing on opening night, there were probably like half a dozen other people in the theater, maybe less. But maybe Bruce is one step ahead of all the rest of us. Maybe he went on FanDuel or DraftKings and bet 20 million that his movie would flop worse than the bastard love child of the Marvels and Captain African America, and he is laughing at all of us right now. And with that, my work here is done. That's all I've got. This has been the WPWWWWU for the 26th of October, 2025, and I now transmit you into the loving arms of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.